Natasha and Her Illegitimate Child in a Muslim Society. A novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. Book 2. This is an intriguing epic story which resonates with love, resilience, courage, and sacrifice. Before we dive into the tapestry of the story, I would like to remind the reader that this novel has been narrated in 2 books. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer, who may quote brief paragraphs for a review to be printed in a public newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. This novel is a work of fiction, but the entire story is based on the real life of a Muslim family. All names, characters, places, and events are either the product of the author's imagination or used literary. Therefore, any resemblance to actual people, living or dead, events, or locales is merely coincidental. Chapter 20. Dr. Natasha's Debates and American Muslim Feminist Professor. To counterattack the views of Dr. Natasha on the feminists' claims, some of them have challenged her and invited her for an open debate. Dr. Natasha accepted the challenge and agreed to debate one of the most famous Muslim feminists. She is a professor of Islam in the Department of Religious Studies at Harvard University. The professor is known as Layla Hassan, and she is originally an Egyptian woman who immigrated as a resettled immigrant to America with her family when she was a 5-year-old child. She did all her schooling and university studies in the States. She is a PhD, postgraduate, and also at present she is a recognized professor at Harvard University. She authored many books on Muslim women. Some of her books have been used as textbooks in Harvard University and many American, European, and Canadian universities. The theme of the debate is equality versus inequality of men and women in Islam. Professor Layla Hassan would argue for the equality of men and women in Islam, and Dr. Natasha would contend for the lack of equality of women and men in Islam. The debate has been organized by the Department of Islamic Studies at McGill University, Canada. The first debater who has been given a chance to speak happened to be Dr. Natasha Shams al-Din. Dr. Natasha, there is no equality of sexes in Islam. The Quran allows the man to marry 4 women at the same time while the woman is not allowed to marry more than one husband at a time. Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 3. Through the same Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 34, the husband is permitted to beat his disobedient wife and the father to beat his rebellious daughter. There are 3 authentic hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad which endorsed and reinforced the practice of female genital mutilation. There are also many authentic hadiths indicating that the Prophet Muhammad practiced child marriage with his 3rd wife, Aisha bint Abu Bakr, who was 6 years old when he contracted her in marriage and slept with her when she became 9 years old. And the Quran supported the practice in Surah Al-Talaq 65, verse 4. Islam gives the husband full right to divorce his wife for reason or without reason, but the wife cannot divorce her husband. According to the Sharia, when the wife is divorced, the custody of the children automatically goes to the father, and the wife has no right of visitation to her children. Professor Layla, the Quran allows polygamy, but makes treating wives equally an important condition. Additionally, there is another verse that stated very clearly that treating the women equally is impossible, and that means the Quran allows polygamy, but discourages its practice, because equality is not possible. Besides, our blessed Prophet remained 13 years in Mecca with one wife only, Khadija. After the Battle of Uhud, polygamy was allowed to solve the problem of the Muslim widows who lost their husbands in the battle. Nonetheless, the founders of the Islamic schools of Sharia allowed the practice to subjugate Muslim women by men and give the men more rights over them. In that way, they went against the egalitarian spirit of the Quran. Wife beating is allowed by the Quran but described by the Hadith. There is a hadith that stated that the husband must beat his disobedient wife with a miswak, which means a toothbrush. Moreover, there is another hadith which stated that the husband should not hit his wife on her face or break her bones. This kind of beating is just like a father or mother scolding and spanking his rebellious child. Female genital mutilation was practiced before Islam, and today, it is practiced mainly by the African and Arab tribes who live by the River Nile. It has nothing to do with Islam, and those hadiths that endorse the practice are the fabrication of later generations of Muslims. Today we do not find all Muslim countries practice it. For example, the Muslims of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia do not practice female genital mutilation. Among the many Arab countries, only Iraq and Egypt practice that evil custom. Likewise, child marriage was a common practice among the pagan Arabs at the time of our blessed Prophet Muhammad. It would be hard for Islam to abolish a commonly accepted social practice. The pagan Arab men hated to have females, and because of that, they used to practice infanticide by burying their born daughters alive. Some Muslim scholars said Islam could not take the girl from the hole of her grave and put her on the throne as a queen. As regards child marriage, among the 13 wives of our gracious Prophet, only Aisha was married to him while she was underage. Divorce of the life partner is allowed in Islam for both men and women. The woman can divorce her husband, and there is in the blessed seerah or biography of the Prophet a case of a woman who came to the Prophet and demanded to divorce her husband. The Prophet gave her permission to divorce him, but he ordered her to return to him the dowry that he gave her as bride's price. Unfortunately, the founders of the Sharia ignored that incident and gave the man the right to divorce his wife and denied that right to the woman. Therefore, the Sharia founders, without any justification or support from a verse from the Holy Quran or an authentic hadith of our infallible Prophet Muhammad, gave the father the right to keep the children after divorcing his wife and unjustly forbade the mother the custody of her own children. Dr. Natasha, first of all, I am glad that you have admitted that the Islamic Sharia gives the husband the right to divorce his wife and denies that right to the wife, and that includes the custody of the children. Therefore, I do not need to spend much time on those gender discriminative rules. You have admitted that child marriage is a common practice among Arabs and Islam endorsed it, and the Prophet Muhammad practiced it with his child bride Aisha. As I have mentioned already, the Quran Surah Al-Talaq 65, Verse 4 allows men to marry underage girls who have not yet reached the age of puberty. Such evil practice is quite common today in the Middle East and many Muslim countries. Every day in those Muslim countries, girls of the ages of 10 and 12 got raped by men as old as their grandfathers because Muhammad did it and the Quran endorsed it. Recently, there is a case of 80-year-old Saudi man who married and raped a 10-year-old child. On the wedding night, the girl was taken to the hospital for copious bleeding in her private parts, and when the mother complained to the Sharia court and demanded the divorce of her daughter, her lawsuit was rejected by the judge because the marriage was legal. CNN has reported that a 12-year-old Yemeni child bride died of internal bleeding due to a rape after 3 days from the day she got married off to an older man. This evil practice can be called nothing but child abuse and rape. I thought you would condemn it. Instead, you seem to find justification for it in the common practices of the Arabs. You said female genital mutilation is an African and Arab cultural practice and has nothing to do with Islam. Why didn't you say the same thing about child marriage? On which ground have you rejected those 3 authentic hadiths of the Prophet of Islam as fabrication and creation by later generations of Muslim scholars and leaders, even though they are found in the most authentic Islamic books of Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim? To support your argument for the right of the woman to divorce her husband, you referred to a hadith that is not even mentioned in one of those authentic collections of Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. It seems to me the hadith is acceptable to you if it supports your views and denied by you if it does not. That is not a correct academic way of making a point. You should either say all the hadiths are unreliable sources of the Sunnah of Muhammad because they had been collected over 200 years after the death of the Prophet, or you should follow the founders of the Sharia who accepted 9 collections of the hadiths and accordingly, they formed the Islamic family laws. I want you to tell us, what is your criterion for accepting and rejecting a hadith? Your argument against polygamy makes the Quran contradict itself. In one verse it permits polygamy and, in another verse, forbids it. Are you serious when you said the Quran allows practice and forbids it at the same time? Do you believe that the Quran is the word of God? Muhammad married 13 women at the same time and slept with 2 slaves without marrying them because they were his slaves. All his 4 caliphs and companions practiced polygamy and married many women and slept with slave females. Suffice it to say, the fourth caliph and the son-in-law of Muhammad married 14 wives and slept with 19 slaves, and his son Hassan married 200 wives. A well-known companion of the Prophet Muhammad, a man by the name of Abdurrahman ibn Awf, had 90 slaves with whom he slept without marrying them. Why have you forgotten to talk about the verse of the Quran that allows Muslim men to have sex with the captives of war without marrying them? I will quote an evil practice that although the companions of the Prophet found it to be immoral and inhumane, still the Quran allowed it. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri said, "The Apostle of Allah, may peace be upon him, sent a military expedition to Adas on the occasion of the Battle of Hunain. They met their enemy and fought with them. They defeated them and took them captives. Some of the companions of the Apostle of Allah, may peace be upon him, were reluctant to have intercourse with the captive wives in the presence of their husbands who were unbelievers. Therefore, Allah, the Exalted, sent down the Quranic verse, and all married women are forbidden unto you except those captives whom your right hands possess." Sunan Abu Dawud, page 2150. Professor Layla, my only criterion for accepting or rejecting a hadith is the Quran itself. The Quran said the men and women are equal in their rewards and punishment, and they had been created from a single soul. Every hadith that contradicts the egalitarian message of the Quran, I will throw it out of the window. I did not say every single hadith is a creation and fabrication of those who came after the Prophet had died and gone to his Lord. There is of course good biography of our blessed Prophet, and there are authentic hadiths mentioned by the founder of our faith. Secondly, I have never said that child marriage is justifiable because it is a commonly accepted traditional practice of the Arabs. I have said Islam could not abolish it because the Arabs did not see it as a wrong practice. Have you found anywhere in the authentic books of Islam that any one of the companions of the Prophet, as well as the enemies of Islam, that objected against his marriage to Aisha because she was underage? Aisha herself boasted among the other wives of the Prophet that she was the only virgin that he married. Islam dealt with slavery in the same way it dealt with the custom of marrying child brides or underage girls. Islam had just left those practices as they were without forbidding them. Other evil practices such as killing infants or burying children alive were strictly forbidden by the Quran, even though the Arabs considered it an important tradition and never blamed anyone who did it. Female genital mutilation is a cruel and evil practice, and hence I will never believe that our blessed Prophet had said those 3 hadiths, which seem to encourage and justify the practice. I know 2 of those 3 hadiths are included in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, but I am sure they had been invented by a later group of Muslim scholars to find some religious authority to carry on with that barbaric and inhumane practice of female genital mutilation. Once again, polygamy is allowed by the Quran with the single condition of dealing justly between the many wives, which practically impossible to love 2 women and treat them equally. Our Prophet Muhammad himself refused to allow his son-in-law Ali to marry another woman besides his daughter, Fatima. I know after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, Ali took other women as wives besides Fatima al-Zahra. Our blessed Prophet admitted that he failed to love all his wives equally, and he used to love Aisha more than his other women. I know you are going to pick up this point again and argue that I contradicted myself by saying that the Quran put justice as an important condition for polygamy, but practically even the Prophet failed to meet that condition. The question before us: what is the point of allowing something which no man can fulfill it? My answer to this question is that Allah wanted to teach practically the Prophet and Muslim men that it is better to stick to one wife. The conclusion is that Allah is telling Muslim men indirectly that polygamy is practically impossible and hence don't do it. For that reason, I strongly support Muslim countries like Turkey and Tunisia, which outlawed polygamy and prescribed punishment to those men who would break that law and take more than one woman at a time. Dr. Natasha, well, that is wishful thinking, but practically polygamy is quite common in Muslim countries. I am surprised that you called Turkey a Muslim country. Everyone knows that Turkey is a secular country, and that is why polygamy, child marriage, and the wearing of the hijab are forbidden by the law. The same thing could be said about Tunisia. But today Turkey is slowly drifting away from its secular foundation that had been established by the founder of modern Turkey, Mustafa Ataturk. I will not be surprised if I hear that Turkey revolted against its secularism and adopted Islamic laws, since 95% of its population are Muslims. You could not establish a good argument against polygamy. You have played with those two seemingly contradictory verses of the Quran and jumped to the conclusion that polygamy has indirectly been forbidden by Allah. Why Allah did not say it very clearly that the man cannot love or treat justly two women, and hence no one should marry more than one wife. The Prophet Muhammad boasted about his polygamy, and there are hadiths that stated that he used to do sex with his 9 wives in one single hour. Regardless, whether any man could do sex with 9 women in an hour, the hadith itself showed the Prophet was praised for doing so. There is another hadith in which the Prophet Muhammad praised his nephew Hassan ibn Ali for his many wives. Hassan was a marriage addict and married 200 women. For that reason, the Prophet said, Hassan is like me in his physical strength of having many wives. His excessive love for women and his abuse to them ultimately hastened his demise. He was poisoned and killed by one of his 200 harems. You have forgotten to refer to the 72 virgins in paradise and the 100 beautiful boys for the enjoyment of the Muslim men. The Quran did not tell us what the Muslim women are going to get when they go to heaven. I guessed Allah knew that all Muslim women would end up into hell. That is why He created those sublime creatures for the enjoyment of men. The number of those virgins differed from one hadith to the other hadith. One hadith stated 72 and another increased their number to thousands. Al-Mikdam ibn Matakarb said, Allah be well pleased with him. The Messenger of Allah said, upon him blessings and peace, for the shaheed, or martyr in jihad, shall be coupled with 72 spouses from the maidens of paradise. Reported in Musnad Ahmed and Al-Tirmizi. The Messenger of Allah said, upon him blessings and peace, every man from the people of paradise shall be married off to 4,000 virgins, 8,000 slave girls, and 100 beautiful maidens of paradise. They shall all meet him within every 7 days. They shall say with their exquisite voices, no creature has ever heard the like before. We are the everlasting females. We never grow old. We are the fine women. We never grow sour. We are the ever-pleased women. We never anger. We are the sedentary ones. We never travel away. Blessings to him who is for us, and we are for him. Al-Bihaqi and Al-Bath wal-Nashar. Al-Tirmizi, Volume 2 states on page 138, every man who enters paradise shall be given 72 virgins. No matter at what age he had died, when he is admitted into paradise, he will become a 30-year-old and shall not age any further. A man in paradise shall be given virility equal to that of 100 men. Al-Tirmizi, Volume 2, pages 35 to 40. A huri or virgin of paradise is the most beautiful young woman with a transparent body. The marrow of her bones is visible like the interior lines of pearls and rubies. She looks like red wine in a white glass. She is of white color and free from the routine physical disabilities of an ordinary woman, such as menstruation, menopause, urinal and awful feces, childbearing, and the related pollution. An huri is a girl of tender age, having large breasts which are round, pointed, and not inclined to dangle. Huris dwell in palaces of splendid surroundings. Young boys in heaven. In Surah Al-Tur 52, verse 24, the Quran promises to supply young diamond-sparkling beautiful boys for the male inhabitants of paradise. Some Muslim scholars will argue that these beautiful boys are there to serve wine and food to the pious Muslim men and not for having sex with them. Whatever purpose those beautiful boys are created for, the Quran never said what the Muslim women are going to get in paradise. If at all a woman managed to enter the heaven of those lovely virgins and beautiful boys, how can she compete with such sublime and beautiful virgins and lovely male creatures? Professor Layla, I am not interested in those verses that speak about the virgins of paradise. I strongly believe that those promises about virgins and boys and rivers of milk and wine are just allegorical. Most of those verses were revealed during the period that the Prophet was living in Mecca with less than 70 Muslim followers. Allah used those allegorical verses to attract the Arab Bedouin to the new religion. When our blessed Prophet moved to Medina and one great number of followers after the 2 great tribes of Alawas and Khazraj joined Islam, the Quran became silent about those beautiful virgins of paradise. The simple explanation for that silence is that those virgins never existed, and they are not going to be there in paradise. Likewise, there are many terrifying descriptions of the suffering in the grave by the bald-headed snake and the torturing of the bare-naked women in hellfire. In my opinion, those terrorizing descriptions are meant to scare believers and make them live a righteous life. All religions more or less have the same warnings and promises. I believe since the Quran prescribes the same punishment for men and women when they commit sins and promises the same rewards for male believers and female believers when they do good, then both sexes are going to receive the same treatment in heaven and hell. Regarding your objection to the Muslim fighters having sex with the captives of war, I can answer that by saying it was a tribal law that the women, children, and wealth of the defeated enemy became a lawful booty for the victorious army. Before Islam came, the Arabs of that region were divided into various warring tribes. They engaged in attacking and robbing each other. It would be impossible for the Prophet Muhammad to change or stop that law of war. If the followers of Islam were not being promised with those earthly temptations of women and robbing the booties of the so-called infidels, they would not have strong incentives to fight and spread the new religion all over Arabia and conquered and occupied in a short period all the regions of the North Africa and reached until Spain in the west and India in the east. The Jews in the Old Testament invaded, conquered, occupied, took captives, and possessed the wealth of their defeated enemies in the name of their God, Jehovah. Dr. Natasha, I am surprised to hear that you are saying Allah made up fancy and fairy tales of beautiful boys and lovely virgins of paradise to make his mujahideen fight and spread his religion. Why should Allah deceive his followers to spread his religion? Jesus Christ and his disciples never used a deceptive method to preach the gospel. Even the Jews in the Old Testament did not fight and possess the promised land through false temptations. Besides that, I have never heard before that any Muslim scholar or preacher said that the virgins of the Quran are only allegorical creatures, and they don't exist in paradise. Such interpretation of the verses of the Quran would land you into serious trouble in a Muslim country, and for sure you would be accused of blasphemy and put to death. How could anyone follow a God who is a deceiver? No wonder that one of the 99 names of Allah is the Great Deceiver. Anyway, I leave your new doctrine about the virgins of paradise to be judged by others and move on to further misogynistic teachings of Islam. The Quran states, men are the guardians and maintainers of women because Allah has made some of them excel others and because they spend out of their property. The good women are therefore obedient, guarding the unseen as Allah has guarded. Surah Al-Nisa 4. Verse 34. This verse is giving the man the authority to maintain the woman as if she is his donkey or camel. Today, the woman can work and take care of herself and family. Still, those countries which applied the Sharia would not allow the woman to work because of this verse. The woman in Saudi Arabia is not allowed to work or even drive a car. In another verse, the Quran stated very clearly that men have a degree of advantage over women. And women shall have rights similar to the rights against them, according to what is equitable, but men have a degree of advantage over them. The Prophet of Islam has a terribly negative attitude towards women. He pictured them as deficient in intelligence and religion and prophesied that many of them will go to hell. Once Allah's apostle went out to offer the prayer of Eid al-Adha or Eid al-Fitr festival. Then he passed by the women and said, O women, give alms, as I have seen that the majority of the dwellers of hellfire are you, women. They asked, Why is it so, O Allah's apostle? He replied, You curse frequently and are ungrateful to your husbands. I have not seen anyone more deficient in intelligence and religion than you. A cautious, sensible man could be led astray by some of you. The women asked, O Allah's apostle, what is deficient in our intelligence and religion? He said, Is not the evidence of 2 women equal to the witness of 1 man? They replied in the affirmative. He said, This is the deficiency in her intelligence. Isn't it true that a woman can neither pray nor fast during her menses? The women replied in the affirmative. He said, This is the deficiency in her religion. Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 1, Book 6, Hadith number 301. The great Islamic scholar, Fakhr al-Din al-Razi, in his commentary on the Quran al-Tafsir al-Kabir, commenting on this verse in Surah al-Rum 30, verse 21 states, His saying created for you, is a proof that women were created like animals and plants and other useful things, just as the highest has said he created for you what is on earth, and that necessitates the woman not to be created for worship and carrying the divine commands. No woman ever sent as a prophetess of God because she is deficient in intellect and religion. We say creating the women is one of the grace bestowed upon us men and charging us with divine commands to complete the grace bestowed upon us. Therefore, the women are not commanded as we men are commanded to do. For women are not charged with many commands as we are charged, because the woman is weak, silly. In one sense she is like a child, and no commands are laid upon a child, but for the grace of Allah upon us to be complete. Women had to be frightened so that they may fear the torment of punishment and so follow her husband, and keep away from what is forbidden, otherwise, corruption would be rampant. Professor Layla, hell with Fakhr al-Din al-Razi, and hell with all the fucking Muslim commentators and scholars who reject the egalitarian spirit of the Quran, shouted the Muslim feminist professor. Will you please allow me to finish my arguments, said Dr. Natasha Shams al-Din. Shut up, you dirty bitch. How dare you call Muslim women are animals? Go and shove your stupid arguments in your dirty ass, screamed the extremely outraged feminist Professor Layla Hassan. Her unbelievably and exceedingly angry reaction has forced the organizing committee to stop the hot debate abruptly and disqualify her as an intellectual Muslim debater and ban her forever from entering the premises of McGill University or any other Canadian university. Chapter 21. The Retaliation of the Muslim Feminists. As we have already mentioned, the inappropriate response of the Muslim feminist, Professor Layla Hassan terminated the debate halfway and led the Department of Islamic Studies at the University of McGill to disqualify her and ban her permanently from entering the university's premises. Professor Layla Hassan had refused to leave the premises until she was kicked out by the police of Montreal. The reason for her refusal to leave, because she was scheduled by the Muslim Students Association of McGill University to deliver a speech on women in Islam on the same evening in the biggest auditorium inside the main building of the university. Despite that excuse, the university authority had considered her no longer capable of speaking to its students due to her disrespectable behavior and vulgar language, and therefore it cancelled her speech and kicked her out in an undignified manner. All in all, the outcome of the debate has been considered by many professors and students a huge victory for Dr. Natasha and great disgrace for the Muslim feminists and their debater. The defeated Professor Layla Hassan has been condemned by other Muslim feminists in the USA as well as in Canada. Due to the number of serious criticisms that she faced in her academic circles, Professor Layla Hassan has been compelled to resign her teaching position at the Department of Religious Studies at Harvard University. She has been considered to be no longer a suitable professor to instruct her students on ethics and religious studies. Other Muslim feminists said her disgraceful act might be tolerated if she had been caught red-handed on committing adultery on broad daylight or had sex with another woman and someone had uploaded her shameful porn video on the internet. At least that might be considered as personal immoral act or sex preference. But to speak publicly those disgraceful words against such a sworn enemy as Dr. Natasha Shams al-Din is intolerable moral misdeed. Therefore, some of those feminist leaders called for her dismissal and legal prosecution. On the other hand, Dr. Natasha became a great heroine, and her first debate has been uploaded in YouTube and millions of people all over the world downloaded it and watched it. For non-Muslims, the debate exposed the lies of the Muslim feminists as well as other Muslims living in the West and falsely claiming that Muslim women are respected and not oppressed. At any rate, the debate made Dr. Natasha popular among non-Muslims. Many people purchased her dissertation book. A Muslim women group in Toronto tried to repair the huge damage that has been done to the name of Islam due to that crashing defeat and disgraceful debate, and hence challenged their opponent for another debate. Dr. Natasha rejected their invitation because they wanted to debate her on women in Christianity. She understood that their motive is to counterattack Christianity rather than having an honest and useful debate about women in Islam. Yet, another feminist group in Canada requested Dr. Natasha to debate one of their leaders on the topic of women in Islam versus women in Christianity and Judaism. The group is having Muslim and non-Muslim female members. The main speakers of that group are known for their repeated vicious attacks on Christianity and demeaning the Jews. In a recent interview, one of the top leaders of the group refused to condemn the Palestinian Hamas as a terrorist group. Dr. Natasha rejected their request when she learned that the group is anti-Semitic and many of its members are ex-Christians who converted to Islam and known for their hatred towards the Western way of life. When Dr. Natasha refused to debate them, the group began to plot against her dissertation. Some of them are Sudanese women who recently immigrated to Canada. Those women spread some nasty rumors which said that Dr. Natasha lied in her dissertation, and she had fabricated stories about Muslim women in Sudan. Consequently, the group leaders took the rumors seriously and sent a team to Sudan to verify the stories of the abused Muslim women that Dr. Natasha included in her dissertation. The team members claimed they had traveled to the city of Wadi Madani and supposedly had met the rival wives and some teachers and students in the girls' school where Natasha worked as a volunteer teacher. According to the findings of the team, none of those accounts had been proved to be true. The team claimed that the women who had been mentioned by names in the dissertation denied anything like that happened to them. They even brought videos showing some Sudanese women denying the claims of Dr. Natasha. Some said they met her and informed her how their fathers treated them with respect, and none of them claimed her husband or father had beaten her. Even some teachers at that prestigious girls' school claimed they had never beaten their students, no matter what mistakes they had done. On the contrary, a few teachers said the Canadian volunteer teacher had taught some girls to rebel against the teachings of the Holy Quran and the hadiths of the infallible Prophet Muhammad. Therefore, she was kicked out of the school and sent to jail. The police authority found out that she was a Muslim pretender and spy to a Zionist feminist group in Canada. Therefore, she was tried by the Sharia court in Wadi Madani city and condemned as an apostate and spy and sentenced to be beheaded, but due to the interventions of the governments of the USA, Canada, and some international feminist groups and women's rights activists, she was able to escape her death penalty. She was retried in Khartoum and acquitted and kicked out of Sudan and her name blacklisted. Accordingly, after their return from Sudan, the Canadian Islamic feminist team submitted a complaint to the Department of Islamic Studies at McGill University and demanded that the dissertation of Dr. Natasha should be rejected because it has been based on academic data created out of mere fabrications and false claims. Nonetheless, the academic authority of the Middle East and Islam Department has disregarded the complaint of the group. When the team could not succeed in convincing the department to revoke the doctoral dissertation of Dr. Natasha Shams al-Din, its leaders have published an article in one of the widely read newspapers in Canada and America. The article accused Dr. Natasha of lying in her academic research and that by including false data that's supposedly being collected from reliable sources in Sudan. Despite that, those Canadians who know about that anti-Semitic and pro-Islam feminist group did not take the article seriously and refused to believe the so-called pieces of evidence supplied by them. During her postgraduate study at McGill University in Montreal City, Dr. Natasha lived for so long away from her two children, her daughter Nadia and her son Sammy. But after completing her dissertation, she decided to be near them. Therefore, as soon as she received her PhD degree, she applied for a teaching position at the Department of Religious Studies at Toronto University. During her years of absence, her two children were living with her brother, Wahid, and his Ethiopian wife. Wahid Muhammad Ahmed and Almaz Abraha could not have a child together because the Ethiopian wife is barren. Even so, their married life is wonderful, and the two children they are raising together added more happiness to their love union. While she was waiting for the university's decision on her application, Dr. Natasha returned to Toronto and began to live with her brother, Wahid, her two children, Nadia and Sammy, and her best friend, Almaz Abraha.